All right, here we are, Unit 3.01, Part 2. So we're going to continue our discussion of rational expressions. And just to start us off, I want you to pause the video and remind yourself what a rational expression is, what happens when we're computing the value of rational expressions, and then just like why is it important? Why are we talking about it? So pause the video, do that, and then we'll move on. Okay, so rational expressions, of course, are the quotient of two polynomials. So we're dividing. That's what we really want to think about is in real life, dividing is super important as far as understanding situations that are happening in the world. And so to get a better handle on that, we're going to go ahead and take a look at. So a company uses two different size trucks to deliver sand. The first truck can transport X cubic yards, the second Y cubic yards. The first truck makes S trips to a job site, while the second makes T trips. What quantities do the following expressions represent in terms of the problem's context? So that should say represent in terms of. And we've done this before, so just go through it and really think about what each one represents. And of course, what we're building up to is this idea that dividing is actually very helpful in understanding aspects of real life. Make sure that you split your paper into two sections. We'll go over this one at the end. All right, so just in looking very basically at the first expression here, S plus T. So S is the number of trips that the first truck makes, and T is the number of trips that the second truck makes. So this here, of course, is just going to be the total number of trips. Nothing too complicated. X plus Y, similar idea, right? The first truck can transport X cubic yards, the second Y cubic yards. So this would be the total number of cubic yards that the two trucks could deliver at the same time or in one trip. C, X times S plus Y times T. So here we have two separate things. We want to understand each of them individually before moving on to the whole piece. So X, of course, is the number of cubic yards, and S is the number of trips that the first truck can take. So, or that the first truck makes. So if you think about it, well, let's say it took made 5 trips, and it could transport 10 cubic yards. When you're multiplying those two, you're finding out the total number of cubic yards that you could make in the day, or with that many trips. So this would be for truck 1, and this would be for truck 2. So here I have truck 1, and here I have truck 2, and for each one of these is the total amount of sand that it could take, that each truck could take. So this would be the total amount of sand delivered by both trucks. Okay, and so then you move on to D, and D at first looks very complicated until you realize that you've already determined what the numerator and what the denominator represent. So if you were to sort of translate this, right, now what you're looking at, well, the numerator is just the total amount of sand. Let me just say total sand. And S plus T is the total number of trips. Okay? So what do you get when you divide the total amount of sand that can be brought by the total number of trips that you're taking? Well, what you end up with is the average amount of sand per trip. More things to look at. So expand using the binomial theorem. And here it's important. I don't want you to compute each coefficient. So you don't need to compute, for example, 7 choose 2, 7 choose 3, all of those. You can leave them in that form. So you can leave them like this. And then what I want you to do is I want you to determine the coefficient of the y to the 10th term. Okay, so expand first, don't compute each, but then compute the coefficient just for the term that has y to the 10th. For what values is the expression undefined? Go back, remind yourself, what am I looking for when I'm asked to find those values where the expression is undefined? And then lastly, can you compute the value of this expression here? Explain why or why not. And make sure you split your paper in half. We'll talk briefly about each of these. All right, so I began the expansion for us for the binomial here, and this is all that you need to do, right? I don't want you to spend all of your time computing all of these things. I just want to see you expand it so that you could do that in the future. And I've done the first 3 terms, and we'll go up to the last term. So what would the last term be? Well, the last term would be 7. Choose 7 y squared to the 0. And negative 2 to the 7th. Okay. So once I've written that all out, I then want to know what is the coefficient of the y to the 10th term. So if I look through here, which one of these, where am I going to have a y to the 10th? Well, here I'll have y squared to the 7th, which is y to the 14th, y squared to the 6th, which is y to the 12th, and then here I have y squared to the 5th, which is y to the 10th. And so what I want to know is what is the coefficient going to end up being for this term. So what I want to do is I want to compute, well, what's 7 choose 2, and what's negative 2 to the 2nd power. So 7 choose 2, what is that going to be? So I'll have 7 factorial divided by 2 factorial times 7 minus 2, which is 5 factorial. And you can go ahead and go on your calculator and figure that out. I encourage you to go ahead and do that. Then we also have negative 2 squared. So actually, let's go ahead and figure this out right now. So that's going to be 21. And then I'm going to have, so if I think about it, this is going to be 21. And then negative 2 squared, well, that's going to be 4. And so I'm going to have 21 times 4. So this is going to be 4 times 20 is 80. 4 times 1 is 4. So this is going to be 84 y to the 10th. And so the coefficient that I'm looking for is going to be 84. For the second one, what values are going to make this undefined, my question boils down to what is going to make my denominator equal to 0. So if I were to simplify this and factor, what I would have on the bottom of my expression, I would have x plus 6, x minus 2. So my question becomes, well, what will make x plus 6 times x minus 2 equal 0? And the values that you end up with are going to be x equals negative 6 and x equals positive 2. And then I want you to go ahead and on your own explain why those values will make this expression undefined. Lastly, can you compute this value here? Okay, and you might have tried, and you may remember, look, 0 over 0, there's a couple different ways to think about it. So first you can say, okay, 0 over 0. Well, anything divided by itself is going to equal 1. But you can also say, well, 0 divided by 0. 0 divided by anything is supposed to be 0. And so you've just come up with 2 different ways to interpret 0 over 0. And what happens? Well, when you have 2 different ways of defining something, you really can't actually define it. I can't say it's 1 and I can't say it's 0. So you cannot compute this expression. 0 over 0 is in fact undefined. It does not exist. Okay? So it's not 1, it's not 0. In fact, it's just simply not defined.